Well, it looks like we have critical mass, so I want to welcome everyone. We know how valuable your time is, so we want to try to get underway on time and this evening on time. So again, welcome everyone to Zone 7 Water Agency's Untreated Water Users second rate setting workshop. My name is Jennifer Persyke, and I'll be helping to facilitate this session today. So we are very pleased to have you with us again. Those of you that attended our first workshop, welcome back. Those of you that were not able to join us, we welcome you this time to this workshop. And I just want to remind everyone about Zone 7's mission, which is to provide reliable water delivery by balancing service reliability and costs, and ensuring that customers are provided with information they need about their water supply and their cost for service. Again, our key components here at Zone 7 are water quality, water reliability, and flood protection. We have really appreciated thus far all the insights and the feedback that we've received from the untreated water users during this process. And we really appreciate your time again today to engage with us. This is an important workshop. We're going to be providing information on the preliminary water supply picture for 2022, and also the findings of the cost of service study for the untreated water user rate. So again, a few housekeeping items. We will be recording the workshop. You saw that when you joined. We recorded the first workshop. So both of those will be available if you're unable to stay for the entire session. And you can refer to the first workshop recording if you happen to have missed that. So that will be available to you. We will be using the chat feature also pretty extensively today. And one of the first things we'd like to ask you to do, so that we know who we have with us today, if you haven't already done so, the three little dots, when you move your cursor to the upper right-hand box of your screen where your face appears, allows you to type in your name. And you see our names there on the left of our boxes. If you would do us that favor of taking a moment to go ahead and plug in your name and your organization, that would be great. We will be muting during the presentation. Also, we do that to eliminate all the background noise that we can get when we leave it open. But we will be opening up to those questions in the chat at any time, and we will be getting to those in a little bit. All right. So, again, if we don't get all your questions answered today, we will respond to any questions you have via email after the workshop. So we want to just, again, touch on the ground rules for this workshop. This just helps us to keep everything constructive and on time. So relate, respect, encourage input. If we can have a little levity in this time, that would be nice for everyone. Active listening, trust, authenticity, and we hope you'll be engaged and present during the session. So I want to, again, touch on, before we get into the meat of the agenda today, just a quick recap for those that may have missed workshop number 1. We held that back in May, seems like a long time ago already, and that workshop was really focused on laying the overall foundation for the untreated water user 2022 rate setting process. So under that umbrella, we provided an overview of all of the water supply sources that you all receive, how that water is delivered, and the various challenges that are impacting various components of that supply. We also talked about the various elements of the untreated water user rate, which includes the supply, overhead, and the other factors that can impact rates. So that's what we dealt with during workshop 1 back in May. Also, between that time and this session today, you received a memo from the Zone 7 General Manager, Valerie Pryor, who is again with us today. He provided an update for you in August regarding the worsening drought conditions and the impacts. First on our agenda, as soon as I'm finished here reviewing it, you'll be hearing again from Valerie Pryor about the latest impacts, actions that the agency is taking, all as a result of worsening conditions. Then we will talk about, there's been a number of activities and work done since the May workshop decisions by the Zone 7 board. We will review all of that with you as well. We will cover the 2022 preliminary water supply portfolio and the plan that Zone 7 has developed to ensure your water is delivered to you this year. And we'll have finally the presentation on the 2022 preliminary untreated water rate. And again, this is all coming from the cost of service study that's been underway now for a few months. So with that, we will follow all of this with a Q&A session. And again, as you think of questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and we will get to those following the presentation. So now I would like to introduce the Zone 7 General Manager. Oh, but before I do that, let me just introduce the entire team. You see lots of faces here with the Zone 7 background. And so everyone that is, we believe is important to the discussion here and available to answer any questions that you will have. So some of these folks will be presenting and others are available for your questions. So we want to welcome the team. Also assisting me with facilitation today is Ellen Cross. And again, all of you, and thank you again for joining. Now I'd like to introduce Zone 7 General Manager Valerie Pryor to provide her welcome and some other information for you.
Good evening and welcome to this workshop. Thank you all for participating today. It's good to have this opportunity, even if it's on Zoom. I do want you to know that our board of directors and staff, we are committed to holding these workshops and believe they're an important part of the rate setting process. And our goal through these workshops is to engage with our untreated water users and stakeholders and to help you better understand water supply and the water rates and the factors that affect both of those. I am going to give you an update on the drought. I think by now everybody knows that this is an unprecedented drought. These are the pictures of Lake Oroville, which is the source of our state water project water, or 70% of the Tri-Valley water. You could see that it was very full in 2017. And then before that, the last drought, how low it was in 2015. But you can see in 2021, it's much lower. It is at 22% of capacity today. And actually, most of the major reservoirs in the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project are very low. The San Luis Reservoir, which is part of the State Water Project, is at 12% of capacity right now. And I just heard a briefing from the State Department of Water Resources today, and they stated that between the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project, by the end of this year, they will collectively be the lowest storage in the history of those projects. Ms. DWR said there's not going to be much of a buffer for next year. So, just more background, water years 20 and 21, second driest 2-year period on record behind 1976-77. April, May, and June, warmest 3-month period since 1896. California recorded its warmest July ever recorded. So we prepared for these conditions in 2021. We have a diverse water supply portfolio. We are able to call on our banked water supplies. We're pumping more groundwater than we normally do, and we were able to purchase water transfer from other water agencies. However, we are concerned about 2022 that not all of these tools will be available. The systems will end with very low storage, and it will take well above average rain and multiple wet years to begin to fill Lake Oroville and the other reservoirs. So we've been alerted by the State Department of Water Resources that we will start 2022 with a very low state water project allocation. And it's unclear if hydrology will improve that very much. Chances are that it will be an intense drought next year as well. Also related to that is that next year, if there's not enough water flowing through the delta, then there could be salinity intrusion. So there could be periods of time where we lose the ability to pump through the delta. And for zone 7, that means that we would likely not have any imported water at all. We'd be solely dependent on our groundwater. For these reasons, on September 1st, the Zone 7 Board of Directors declared a local drought emergency, implemented stage 2 of the water shortage contingency plan, and are requiring 15% mandatory conservation from the retailers. So at this point in time, it's only on the municipal, industrial, or urban users that 15% does not apply to the untreated users. But as you all know, if things are much worse next year, we can't pump through the delta, there may be outages. So that's the update on the drought. I think everybody's aware that this is a severe drought at this point in time. Then getting back to water rates, before I turn it over to the rest of the team, I will warn you that the cost of water is increasing at a rapid rate, especially due to this unprecedented drought. We are going to show you the preliminary results of the rate study, which I will say the raw results of the spreadsheet calculation. Those numbers will give you sticker shock, but staff does plan to recommend a few ways to mitigate this rate to the Finance Committee later this month. So we are just showing you the results of the spreadsheet or the rate model. But staff's going to recommend a few ideas to the Finance Committee. One is a recalculated true up of the 2020 costs under a new methodology based on board input, and then also spreading Delta conveyance planning costs over a 2-year period. That's a major piece of state water project infrastructure that we will be paying increased planning costs for. So we do look forward to your feedback today. That is why we're having these workshops. And again, thank you for attending. And I will now turn it over to Javia Green to provide a recap of untreated activities for 2021.
Thank you very much, Valerie. We wanted to take this opportunity to provide you with a brief update of what's been going on this year, particularly since May. As you may recall, last year, the board decided not to raise rates for calendar year 2021. So the rates are the same as they were in 2020. We met with you all back in May. We had our first engagement workshop, which was very nice, very valuable feedback was provided. We provided a reconciliation of the calendar year 2020 preliminary rate to the Finance Committee back in June. In August, we kicked off the cost of service study with our consultant, Raftellus. And then as previously mentioned, at September 1st, we had a board workshop where we talked about policy considerations for untreated water rates that we would use to form the rate going forward. So the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what the board decided that day. So September 4th, there was a board workshop to determine the untreated water rate components going forward. And what's shown in blue are the water rate components that were previously in the rate and will continue. So those are the water supply costs, water supply staff costs. And agency overhead. There was discussion about inclusion of agency overhead in the rate, and the board wanted a little more time to provide final direction in staff. But staff's recommendation is that overhead be included in the rate based on previous and current cost of service study findings. And we will bring forth this recommendation to the Finance Committee and full board for final policy decisions and incorporation into the rate. And based on feedback from the board, 2 staff cost elements were removed from the rate, and that's local water rights staff costs and then groundwater monitoring and management. So going forward, these are the rate elements that will be included in the rate and have been included in the calculation that will be provided to you in just a bit. Next up will be Sal Segura, and Sal's going to give us an overview of the 2022 preliminary water supply portfolio and plan. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Javia. I'll be presenting this next slide on our preliminary water supply portfolio. And so some of you have seen this before. This is in graphical form. And what we're going to do here is show what our preliminary supply outlook looks like for 2022. So you'll see there, just starting in the middle, what our water supply looks like. And again, this assumes a 5% table A allocation from the state. So that will be shown here. So the first supply of water that we have is from State Water Project carryover. That's shown there as 10,000 acre feet in the yellow. And this is what we normally aim for each year. We target 10,000 just as a standard of hedging for the next years. In the local supply, where we normally have some water to bring in from Lake Doval, we have 0 this year, due to the dry conditions that you've heard about. Then in green, we've got what we can expect to withdraw from our local groundwater basin, meaning the Livermore Valley groundwater basin. So we're looking at about 13,000 acre feet there for supply. And then the big piece, 40% of our expected supply, we're anticipating will come from the groundwater banks down in Kern, namely Semi-Tropic and Coelho. Those are 2 programs we've been tapping on lately. Similar to this year, we anticipate maximizing our recovery from both of those banks of nearly 20,000 acre feet. Followed by that is the light blue. This is the 5% allocation I was talking about, and that's 4,000 acre feet that we, at this point, we're again just guesstimating that we might have a 5% allocation. If we do get 5%, then that's how much table A we anticipate on receiving in 2022. Followed by a small amount of local water in the lake. As we got this year, we're anticipating 700 acre feet there, which is just a small amount. Granted, right now we're assuming there's no more water coming into the lake, but nobody can predict the forecast. So October, November, December could bring in some water, but we're not counting on that at this point. And then last but certainly not least, there is 1,000 acre feet of water transfers, and this could be in the form of UBA Accord water and or other dry year programs that we've participated in the past. And so that brings it full circle to the 48,400 acre feet that we're showing there. And this will help to get us through the next year. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Lizzie Foss to talk about cost of service study findings.
Thank you, Sal. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lizzie Foss, and I'll be presenting the preliminary findings from the 2021 cost of service study. So at the first workshop, as part of the survey recap, we presented some mixed results surrounding single versus multi-year rate schedules. And we mentioned that we would be analyzing both. So we're reporting back to you this summer. We did perform an extensive analysis and ultimately determined that multi-year rates were really not feasible and really did not provide added benefit to our untreated customers. And this chart kind of provides just a little insight as to why multi-year rates don't work well. The multi-year rate schedule really requires an established reserve fund to mitigate against the fluctuations in the year-to-year costs. So because the untreated water program doesn't have a reserve fund, a true-up or a reconciliation is needed each year to ensure that the agency isn't over or under collecting. And because of the true-up that we need to do, the rates are evaluated on an annual basis. So because of this, the single year rate setting process is really the best method, and we will continue to set rates on an annual basis like we have in the past. So this is a slide showing your current rate. and the components that make up that rate. The current rate, as you know, is $173 an acre foot. And as you can see from the pie chart, the water supply component, the blue slice, is really the driver of your rate. And this is made up of the supplies that Sal just covered. It's that full water supply portfolio. Lesser components in terms of costs were made up of the water supply, local water rights, and the groundwater monitoring and management staff costs. So that was your full pie of untreated water rate, and the preliminary 2022 untreated water rate has landed. And again, like Valerie said, this is the raw data at $239 an acre foot. So similar to your current rate, the water supply costs are still the main driver of the rate. They make up about 83%. The difference here is that groundwater monitoring and management, and then local water rights have been removed. And in its place, we've inserted overhead, and you'll see that that is about 5% of the rate. So because overhead's new, we just wanted to provide a little bit of overview of it. At the board workshop, as Javia mentioned, there was discussion to include it, but the board wanted more information before providing us with the final policy decision. But staff is recommending that the overhead be included, and we will bring that to the finance committee and the final board for their final policy decision. These costs are really just the cost of running the agency and providing services to both our treated and untreated customers. And the chart on the right of your screen is an illustration of just how overhead is allocated within the agency. So overhead is allocated to both the flood operations and the water operations of the agency. And the untreated customers are passed on about 1.4% of the costs attributed to the water operations. So a very small piece of the overhead is passed on to untreated water customers. So this slide just provides a general overview of how the cost of service study calculates the rate. We'll start with the table. The table shows the 2022 projected demand for treated and untreated water users, and then the allocation of the cost to each customer. So the allocation is based by taking the specific projected demand and dividing it by the total demand. And based on our 2022 projections, untreated customers are responsible for roughly 15% of those costs. And the formula down below in the circle is the next step of the calculation and is used to determine the unit cost. So we take that, the dollar cost associated to the untreated customers and divide it by their demand to get our unit cost per acre foot. So the purpose of this slide is just to show you a breakdown of each component of the 2022 preliminary rate. The first two components will be included as the board directed. And again, overhead will be brought forward as a staff recommendation as an additional component in the rate. So the total projected cost column, this is showing the agency costs for each component. The next column shows the portion of those costs that are attributed to the untreated customers. And then finally, your last column provides the unit cost for each of these components. And add up all the unit costs to get your total cost per acre foot, which is again, $239. The agency overhead dollars that you see here in the chart are based on the overhead that's associated to programs directly benefiting the untreated customers. These include the water utility services, supply source and conveyance, and water storage. And just to give kind of an overview of what's coming up on our schedule, in a couple of weeks, we will present the preliminary rate and the reconciliation to the Finance Committee. And after the Finance Committee has a chance to review, the draft cost of service study will go to the board for final adoption. And once we have board approval, staff will notify our untreated customers of the final rate. And as always, you're welcome to join us in that meeting, and we will be providing you information on how to join as we get closer as well. And then next spring and summer, staff will begin the rate setting process again with the reconciliation of the 21 calendar costs. And then we kick off the 23 rate setting process over summer. And now I will hand it back to Jennifer and Ellen to facilitate the Q&A portion of our workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lizzie. So again, just the presentation you've just seen, obviously it will be part of the recording. So you will have those numbers, and we'll send you that link again with the first workshop that was held back in May, so that you have all of that information as well. So we are hopefully starting with any of the questions that were provided in the chat. And I'm going to ask Ellen if she sees any there that we need to focus on first. If you've got a question, go ahead. And if there aren't any questions in the chat, I think there's a couple.
I
But
haven't
Ellen,
seen any questions yet come up in the chat unless I missed them. And if I do, I apologize in advance. I've seen some introductions. So thank you for introducing yourself in the chat. We really appreciate that. And if there's any questions, please queue up in the chat. So we have a question from Christopher Moen at Wente Vineyards. How would the 15% usage reduction be enforced?
this sounds, if I'm understanding the question, Christopher, are you talking about the 15% mandate reduction for the treated water customers?
This is Valerie. I will answer that. That will be enforced by the retailers. So basically Zone 7 notifies our 4 retailers that we will only meet 85% of their demands, and then they will enforce it. I believe Dublin San Ramon Services District will go to 3-day-a-week outdoor irrigation and no irrigating during the daytime hours. I believe Livermore will look at odd and even day restrictions on outdoor watering. I don't know yet what Pleasanton or Cal Water would do. And then the retailers would notify violators, and then there would be fines.
Thank you, Valerie. And Lori Souza asked, what is the percentage of increase between the existing rate and the new proposed rate?
That's a good question. So like we said, the water supply component of the rate is about 80%. So any increase in those costs will have a larger impact on your rate. So water supply costs have gone up about 38%. And water staff costs, so water supply staff costs have gone up about 40%.
Thank you. Any other questions? Please put your questions or comments in the chat room.
This is Mark. This is Mark Triska. I've got a question. I'm calling in.
Thank you, Mark. Go ahead.
So I just want to make sure I heard properly. Did Valerie said the staff costs have gone up? What was it? Was it 40 or 4%?
40.
I'm sorry, 40 or 4?
Correct, 40.
Okay, why have staff costs gone up so much?
Well, the staff costs that are in your current rate are from values from the 2019 study. So, you know, we've had, it's based on hourly pay and hours worked. So the hours fluctuate as well, and the costs have increased due to inflation and just cost of living adjustments. So that's really the main driver for the increase in the labor costs. But again, the labor costs are only 12% of your rate. So it sounds like a high percentage increase, but it's having a minimal impact on the rate in general.
I just question. I mean, I understand that you guys are probably investing more time in doing your research and finding other sources, but 40% seems abnormally high in any industry.
Thank you. So we also have a comment. So to be clear, it's about a 40% increase in rates. Is there a way to gradually introduce increases 40% seems like a large increase between the years. So is there a way to gradually introduce increases? That's the question.
This is Valerie. As I said earlier, we are going to recommend to the Finance Committee some means of mitigating this rate increase. Again, the rates are based largely on the cost of water, and the cost of water is increasing. We don't necessarily see an end to that trend anytime soon.
Thank you. David Lunn asks, we've asked for information to be provided in advance. Why can't that be done?
Well, for this workshop in particular, typically for any board meeting or any committee meeting, we'll have all the materials provided a week in advance. But for this workshop, there was no report associated to it. It was just the presentation, and the presentation can certainly be provided after the workshop.
That's really why we're holding this workshop today. These results, the information that Lizzie walked through is actually hot off the presses, literally, from the study that's been underway for the last month or so. So you're seeing it. The board was just briefed on this, and you are seeing these results so far. The preliminary rate that Lizzie reviewed with you, but this is quite literally off the press. So that's why we're holding the workshop, so that we could brief you on it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Steve. This is Steve Egan from the club at Ruby Hill. It was mentioned there may be water delivery interruptions next year, and I'm wondering how those will be handled. Do we get a warning about that, or are they random, or just how might that be handled on your end?
Sal, are you available to answer?
I can address that. I'm Para Flores, Integrated Planning Manager at Zone 7. We will work with you as closely as possible and keep you abreast of any outages that we hear about from the Department of Water Resources, who are working very closely with the Department of Water Resources. So we will try to give you as much notice as possible when we have that information.
Do you have any idea? I know it's hard to look to the future, but is there, a duration of the interruption in service, or is that all to be kind of worked through as it happens next year?
Yeah, so we are working through that right now. Certainly one of the concerns is that the delta, if we don't get much rain, that the delta could get really salty, and that could prevent us from pumping from the delta. So we'll be monitoring water quality conditions over time and watch out for trends. So we'll keep you abreast of any trends indicating that there's going to be an outage as soon as we can.
Okay.
Please make sure you are on the mailing list from Zone 7. So I do hope you receive. If you don't receive notices right now about outages, please do let us know.
Thank you. We also have another follow-up question from David Lund about asking for a list of overhead position and programs that they've asked for 2 meetings ago. I'm unclear which programs are overhead.
Or all that backup and calculations will be presented in the cost of service study. It will very clearly lay out what programs are included, which programs are excluded, and then how the calculation is done.
Thank you, Lizzie. Christopher Moen asks, is there an expectation of what the fines penalties will be for water violations? For instance, users not conforming to watering on odd days, Dublin and Livermore.
This is Valerie. I do not know the answer to that. I know Dublin San Ramon Services District, I believe they will discuss this with their board of directors next week. And their board packet would be out 72 hours before that board meeting. So that's when I would see their numbers. And I do not know for the other cities. Again, we'll see them when they have their city council packets, board packets, or city council packets.
Thank you, Valerie. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, David. Will the delta slowly get salty due to the lack of water? Will this be a slow process of higher and higher TDS in delta waters? Can we get copies of the monthly delta water quality during the next year?
Yeah, I'm expecting that we'll be seeing a trend of increasing salinity for not getting any rain. However, I'm going to knock on wood here. If you do have any levee breaks, et cetera, that would be a more immediate impact of the change in salinity. It could also experience some spikes depending on tidal patterns, et cetera. In terms of monthly delta water quality during the next year, I believe some of that information is already posted online, but we can certainly look into it.
Thank you, Ampara. Other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Yaden. Okay.
Any other questions? Well, I want to remind everyone that we will be following up, as Lizzie said, with this information and other information to all of you as this, oh, it looks like there is another question. It takes a minute to type.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Well, the deltas, when will we get to see the report?
The report will be available for the October board meeting. And it'll be available a week before that item is addressed at the board meeting.
Lizzie, can you remind us of the date of the board meeting?
I believe it will be scheduled for October 20th.
So, and the board packet will be out 72 hours in advance?
Yes, well, we typically send it out a week in advance, so the 13th.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Well, thank you. Maybe Jennifer, we should wrap up while people may be thinking of other questions.
Yes, I will talk slowly in case you're typing. We want to thank you again for joining us today. And again, these are very difficult times in California. I think the picture that Valerie painted it's unprecedented, the challenges we're facing. And with the shortage of water, it's becoming more expensive to find the water that all agencies around the state really need to acquire to serve their customers. So it is fortunate that Zone 7 has such a diverse portfolio. That is the good news here. But that water is more costly. And so, as Valerie said, they're looking at ways that they'll be able to make some adjustments between now and the presentation to the Finance Committee that's coming up. And then that will then carry forward to the board meeting. So definitely be looking out for that board packet. And if you have other questions that you think of after this this Zoom call, we can certainly field those questions. We have a slide, I think, right after this slide that provides Lizzie Foss's direct information. You can call or email her. Also, again, there is various information on past board meetings, et cetera, that is public information on the website. So I do see one more question here. regarding staff time spent on projects. So, you know, I don't know who wants to take that one on the team here and how that's accounted for. Again, I think that's going to be detailed in the information that Lizzie mentioned in the study itself, if I'm not mistaken. Lizzie, is that correct?
I can answer this one.
Osborne, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, David, for the question. So the way overhead works is we will be charging us on big projects their overhead. So that overhead does not trickle down to untreated customers. So when we say flood control and water operations, flood control gets its piece of overhead, water operations and the capital projects get it, their overhead. And then the portion that is left for untreated and untreated customer, treated and untreated customer, that's when you untreated customer gets a share of 1.4%. So the big projects, that is not charged to untreated customers, so they don't get charged to the ozone project or any other big projects that the agency is undertaking.
I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. So David asked, how much water does Zone 7 have that could be used for carryover next year?
This is Sal. Yeah, at this time, we're anticipating having 10,000 acre feet of carryover for use in 2022.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Steve from the club at Ruby Hill again. If we have a average rainfall this winter, and we're asked to reduce by a percentage, what would that percentage be based off of? Is it a 5-year average? Is it this year? And approximately, all things equal, what would you see as a percentage reduction off of that number that we could kind of work with, you know, starting today?
Are you asking for a reduction in mandatory conservation?
Yeah, I know we're
Okay.
at 15 right now, but you know, let's say it's an average rainy season here through next April.
Right.
What would you guys be seeking as a reduction? And the follow on to that is what is that reduction based on? What is it, a single year, of a 5-year average, or what would you, where might we
Right. This is Valerie. I'll address that.
mhm.
First of all, what we are hearing from the State Department of Water Resources is that we will need well over an average year, multiple well over average years to reduce this deficit. So I don't know how much average rainfall will help us. I believe I was at a meeting a few weeks ago where the director of the Department of Resources said it would take 140% of average rainfall to start to get runoff in Lake Oroville, and 200% of average rainfall to start to fill Lake Oroville. So, so that being said, at this point in the water year, we're pretty confident in, we've got our plan for 2021 and it's going to work. We've made some assumptions for 2022. We will get our first preliminary allocation from the State Department of Water Resources beginning of December. Then hopefully, we start to get some rain either locally or statewide in, December, January. So we will adjust. And this sort of relates to Dave Lund's questions in the chat box. The next time we talk about the operations plan with the Water Resources Committee will be in January after we had the preliminary allocation. So And all the operational questions for next year, we've just made our, an assumption, for drought contingency, and we'll start updating that and getting into the details. The earliest would be in January. So that being said, the way we got to the 15% conservation is we looked at what our normal demands are. We looked at what we think is a good, reasonable assumption for 2022, and the delta was 15%. So depending on, the hydrology for next year, the state water project allocation, the ability to gather other, obtain other water transfers or purchases, we would somewhat in real time adjust up and down. So I can't tell you exactly what it'd be, but it'd be based on like, oh, wow, we're going to get a 10% allocation or a 15% allocation, or, hey, we were able to buy another 10,000 acre feet of water. So then we could more or less back into easing of any reductions. And, obviously, as soon as the water situation applies, we would want to, ease up on that. So I can't give you an exact number, but it'll basically be based on real-time data that we'll start getting towards the end of 22.
Okay.
Thank you. Dave has a couple of questions. Overhead is only charged the staff time for the big projects. The engineer is presenting large projects that need a larger percent of overhead staff time than an engineer working on untreated water. Is there an adjustment?
I'll take that question. So the way overhead works is if an engineer is working on a big project like ozone, that engineer charges direct time to that project. It is not overhead. So overhead is in a meeting like today, or in a meeting like the workshop what we had on September 1st, the board of directors do not have a direct project they work on. It is a more centralized, they work on the entire agency. So that portion of overhead is that what goes to untreated customers. So the example given here of an engineer working on a big project, that engineer will be charging directly to that project, not on overhead.
Thank you, Osborne. The next question from David is Zone 7 has 4 to 7 years of wet water and storage. If we conserve now, this will only add to more storage. How can a few thousand acre feet of additional storage help when Zone 7 already has 350,000 acre feet of wet water in storage?
Yeah, as I said, these are operational questions, and we will be discussing them with the Zone 7 Water Resources Committee in January as we have a better understanding of what 2022 might look like.
Thank you. And then asking and inquiring if the overhead will be described in the study report.
Yes.
Thank you. And yes, you will have a copy of the PowerPoint, correct? We'll be distributing that, Lizzie?
PowerPoint is embedded in the link that you'll be receiving of the recording of this workshop. Do we have any final questions on the material that's been presented today regarding the components or the calculation on the preliminary rate for 2022? Any other questions regarding that? I don't see any. Going once. Well, again, if you do think of something else, another question related to the information provided today, you can certainly follow up with Lizzie Foss at the email shown here on your screen, or you can give her a call. It's always good to email it because then if there's attachments or things, we can get those back to you. There's more information, of course, about the district and sources of water and all of that at their website. And again, this is preliminary information that's been presented today. There will be more work, but the point of this workshop was to bring you the information as soon as it was available so that we could engage with all of you, get your questions. This has been very helpful. And there will be a few more steps before the rates for 2022 for the untreated water users are, set. So we can certainly also, I see a note here from Dave, the questions that were asked at the first workshop also will be provided in that recording. So if there's anything else, again, feel free to go ahead and shoot an email to Lizzie Foss. And we do appreciate all of your time today to be a part of this workshop. We appreciate the ability to provide you the information as soon as it was available from the rate study. And we wish you a very good evening and a rest of the week. And please take care of yourselves. Thank you.